Hi, everyone. We are excited to do this live coaching call. We are trialing a new system, so bear with us as we figure out how to navigate all the different buttons. But we are excited to talk to you about the Solid Starts method and ways to start solids with your baby to help raise a happy and healthy eater.
So just to introduce ourselves quickly, for those of you that don't know us, my name is Kim Grenawitzke. I'm a pediatric occupational therapist, a international board certified lactation consultant, a certified neonatal therapist, and a mom of two very rambunctious and wild little ladies who have taught me just as much, if not more, than my 20 years of clinical practice have. And then Kary is the other side of my apple over here.
I have very similar credentials to Kim's, very impressive credentials. I am a pediatric occupational therapist with over 20 years of experience working with infants and toddlers and families as they navigate starting solids, preventing picky eating, and reversing picky eating. Both of us are both OTs and IBCLCs, so we are lactation consultants as well. And the topic of starting solids is a passion of ours.
All right.
All right, so just a little bit of housekeeping. Like I said, we are trialing a new system. We are going to run into some glitches because that's just the way of it, but we're going to do the best we can. We have not just Kim and I here, but also Marisa, our amazing expert who is also an OT and who will be answering questions in the comments as much as she can. And she's going to also sort of feed us some questions as we go so that we can try and make sure we're hitting on the topics that matter to you and answering the questions that matter to you. And you can drop those questions in the chat so that she can go ahead and send those to us and so that we can kind of keep an eye on that. This whole talk is pretty informal. If you haven't already noticed, Kim and I are very informal. We have known each other for just about 20 years, are dear friends, and because of that, we are going to talk over each other a little bit, maybe even interrupt each other every now and again because we love each other and because we're generally in each other's heads and happy to finish each other's sentences. So please bear with us. There's a lot to learn, a lot to get through. So we're going to do our best to not rush, but to try and cover a lot of ground because there are so many exciting things to learn and know about starting solids. And we want you to have the confidence to get started by the end of this.
And we've got people from Canada, Berlin, New York City, Texas. I saw North Dakota, India, Canada. So people
love that. Welcome.
Joining us here. I love that.
Let us know how old your baby is and if you've started solids or you're about to start solids, kind of where you are in the journey. We love knowing where they are in the process. So Kim and I both, like I said, are passionate about starting solids, and I got started in this line of work as an occupational therapist who was working in an outpatient clinic, again, 20 plus years ago, seeing multiple cases of toddlers who were not progressing off of purees. So at one point I had 5 kids on my caseload who all only ate pureed foods, who never got off of baby foods. And at that point, it sort of occurred to me something was wrong with the way we were encouraging families to start solids. That sort of cracked open a question for me around whether or not there was a different way to do this, and has led me down a 20-year career in examining how we start solids and in supporting families with starting solids, because we know that the skills that are built early are the skills that help support eating throughout the lifespan. And it's not just in my clinical practice. I have 2 of my own kids, just like Kim has 2 of her own kids. Mine are now quite a bit older. I have a 10-year-old and a 14-year-old. So I've been doing this a long time. But when I started solids with my own children, I learned so much. So my daughter was a very easy eater from the start. She breastfed well. She took a bottle when it was time to take a bottle when I needed to go back to work. She transitioned to solids without any difficulty, although she was slow in her progression. It took her a while to kind of really figure it out. She loved it and really enjoyed it from the start and has always been a great eater. My son, on the other hand, took me down about 10 pegs where I thought that my daughter was this brilliant eater because of all the work that I was doing. I recognized almost immediately that I just had a easygoing child and a pretty good eater from the start because my son came along like a tornado. Challenging kid from the very start, and it was no different with breastfeeding, no different with bottle feeding, no different with starting solids, and that he was challenging with all three. This boy was just a little bit more um, big in his feelings, big in his emotions, big in his responses, very quick to tell you what he liked and didn't like. And still, it was a moment for me to really dig into how do we teach kids, especially big filling kids, how to do these things and build skills. And a moment where I got to use a lot of these same strategies in my own household to sort of hone them and figure out what a very different child, not an easygoing child, needs, because we know that there's a wide variety of temperaments out there. And it was a moment of realizing that this approach absolutely can work to lay an incredible foundation of eating for even the most big feeling, challenging child. So a really important learning moment. But as you can see here, my son has grown from a very resistant kid into a phenomenal eater himself, a 10-year-old who is also a strong eater and loves food. So not only have we done this in our own households, not only have we done this with thousands of babies in our own clinical practice, but now millions of families worldwide have used our approaches, the Solid Starts approach, to help start their babies off on a really strong foot of eating solid foods.
So now I want to shift gears a little bit and share a little bit about my story, because while it's very similar to Kary's in some, especially from a professional standpoint, and I also have one very highly sensitive, challenging, explosive kid and one much more easygoing, what Kary and I like to call seaweed kid, that just kind of goes with the motion of the ocean. My story was a little bit more tricky in the beginning. So my first daughter, Maeve, who's now 6 and about to start first grade next week, which is like mind blowing, was born in 2020. And anyone here that, was going through pregnancy and parenthood during that time period knows it was a really, really weird time to not only be pregnant, but also to have a baby. So I went in for my 36-week appointment and had no amniotic fluid left and was immediately admitted to the hospital for a emergency induction. So Maeve came out screaming after 3.5, 4 days of labor. I don't remember how long at this point. I feel like the world just makes you not remember those things. And she was teeny tiny, but man, she made sure we knew she was there. And she was loud, and she has not stopped screaming and complaining about being evicted ever since. I like to joke, but she also really kind of struggled in the beginning with eating because she wasn't ready to be here yet. So we did a lot of, you can see in this picture over here, that's called a supplemental nursing system, with a tube that's attached to a syringe that's by my breast so she could figure out how to latch. She had some oral motor stuff that I had to work on by myself over FaceTime with Kary, figuring this out during the pandemic. And then starting solids happened, and it was kind of a nice start. It was just a nice time to have like a nice, refreshing new start. And we had a ton of fun starting solids. She enjoyed it. She didn't do any of the behaviors that a lot of people talk to us about. But then toddlerhood hit, and I mean 12 months and 1 day hit, and girl went, she became a completely different kid. And we again had to use a lot of these strategies about teaching our kids to eat and helping them understand the skills they have and helping them understand that we are there to support them, but not save them at every single moment. And it was rough. It was really, really hard there for a good 6-9 months, but we stayed strong. And we're going to talk about these strategies as we go. And now this is the kid who requested sushi for her birthday dinner on Sunday, who I've never had turn something down, who can easily describe a food from the flavors that it feel to what it feels like in her mouth, knows how to talk about food. And she was the kid that was on the floor screaming and only wanted to nurse instead of having dinner. So there is another side of the coin, as long as you can stay strong and do what you need to do to help your child learn how to eat. So I think Kary and I and everyone on the Solid Start staff feels really, really proud that we don't have a staff full of kids that have eating issues. And it doesn't feel like a coincidence to us because we really truly do walk the walk and talk the talk. This is not just stuff we're telling you about. These are things that we do with our own homes to keep our meal times happy too. And then
And as we go,
my other daughter Blythe is just very Blythe,
oh
and
yeah, Blythe.
she's easy, so we don't even have to talk about her. But
Well, and what we want to just point out is that the through line with all of this, underpinning all of this, are the habits you build early. So the habits that you as the parent are building really matter when you start solids, because those habits go under the radar the more we do them, and you sort of don't notice what you're doing when you let them sort of guide you through starting solids or any other aspect of parenting. So we want those to be really supportive, positive habits. Habits make our life easier because we don't have to think about things. They make our actions automatic. So we want to build habits that help you serve the same foods that you eat and love to your baby from the start. And the habits that your baby is building, which are that they come to the table happy and ready to engage with the food, ready to watch you, ready to socialize. Those habits of exploring food and being interested in sitting at the table are some of the most important elements of starting solids. So much more important than the exact nutritional profile of each meal. So we're going to say this again and again. The habits you form now matter. The habits that you form now, you have control over and can be one of your best allies in terms of helping your baby grow into a strong eater.
So we're going to start by talking about readiness for solids, but I want to always frame any of the things that we're about to talk about in terms of habits and in terms of the kind of this, like, think of this as almost parenting, right? Kary talked a lot about her clinical experience, but something that a lot of my friends have said, my friends that have not asked me about starting solids before they've gotten started. Obviously, Kary and I's skill set is only important to our friends at like a very small period of time. It's not the friend that gets like concert tickets and stuff. But the thing that we always, or the question that always breaks my heart is, when do I stop making special food for my baby, toddler, kid? Because if they do truly want to be able to take them to a restaurant that they love, they want to be able to only cook one meal at night, because who has time to make I sure don't have time to make multiple meals. And that question is always like, oh gosh, I wish you never did, because we want to help you get into the habit of not having to. So one of the first steps in terms of helping not get into that habit of needing to make special food is waiting until your baby is showing signs of developmental readiness to start solids. So when it comes to starting solids, depending on your pediatrician's style, you may get a handout in a discussion at your 4-month-old appointment, or they may wait until the 6-month appointment. But if we look at the recommendations from the major governing bodies, so we're talking about the AAP, the CDC, and the WHO, so we're talking United States and World Health Organization, those governing bodies recommend that we wait for babies to show signs of developmental readiness, which all tend to pop up around 6 months of age. Now, that does not mean that there's not a baby that shows readiness at 5.5 months, and there may be some that are closer to 7, but somewhere around 6 months of age, your baby should be doing these skills to start solids. The research has told us that there really isn't any benefit outside of allergens, which we'll touch on in a minute, to starting solids before your baby shows signs of readiness. So from someone that has done this with my own kids and has coached hundreds and thousands of other babies through this, you don't want to have to deal with the gross poop anyway. So waiting until your baby shows signs of developmental readiness has positives for you and for your baby. The 3 signs of readiness that we want to look for is we want them to be able to sit. They do not have to sit perfectly. This is actually my second daughter, Blythe, and she's closer to 5.5 months here. And she, again, was just a really strong early sitter. But you want your baby to be able to sit with a little bit of help. This could mean you put them up in the high, there she goes, tilting a little bit. You can put them up in the high chair and they can hold their body up. If you hold them on your lap, they can sit there and reach with their arms. You just don't want them to be able, you don't want to put them in the high chair and have them be the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Essentially, you want them to be able to sit with a little bit of help. But on top of that, they need to be able to use their hands when they are sitting. So this is baby Oakley here. You can see that mom hands her a toy. She's able to grasp it and bring that hand to the mouth. This is critical for 2 reasons. Number one, when a child can actually use their arms in sitting, that tells us that their body is actually even more strong than just if they can sit by themselves. They're actually able to use all those muscles to sit really well, but then also be able to, the fancy therapy term is disassociate, but they're able to use their arms outside of their body too, which tells us that everything is super strong, that they're able to keep themselves up. And second of all, that means they can feed themselves. The research is clear, and this has been replicated in the baby population. It actually started in the geriatric population. We'll talk about this in a minute, but self-feeding decreases choking risks. So when a baby or an adult or anyone puts food in their own mouth, their choking risk significantly decreases. So the ability for a baby to sit, pick something up, and bring their hands to their mouth immediately already decreases choking risk. The final sign of readiness, which is so important and many times gets missed, and especially in my generation where grandmas and my mom, for sure, there's videos of this happening, were airplaning food into my mouth and forcing it in. We want your baby to show interest. If we're thinking about starting solids as something that they're learning to do, it's a new developmental skill. They're learning to feed themselves. They're learning to chew. They're learning to figure out how food fills their body. We want them to be cognitively interested in the activity that they're doing. We can't force a baby to learn to roll or to learn to crawl or to learn to walk. And we really shouldn't be forcing them to learn how to eat either. And what we do is we watch for them to show that they are interested in eating. Baby Riley here is watching her mom eat. Her mom is always so embarrassed about the little noises she makes. But baby Riley here is not only watching her mom, her eyes are on those chopsticks, but she's bringing her hand to her mouth and she's like, ooh, mom, this is really exciting. Put me in, coach. I want to participate. So when your baby is sitting by themselves, they can reach and use their arms to bring those hands to their mouth and they're showing interest in food and eating. That's the time to get started and to start exploring solids.
So I'm seeing tons of great questions in the comments, questions about excitement with getting started, but then also some fears about choking, questions that are specific to like, how do you do this? So let us know if you've already gotten started. Let us know if you're seeing those readiness signs that Kim just talked about in your baby or not seeing them yet and kind of how old your baby is. But once your baby is showing those readiness signs, we want you to remember that once you get started, those first few weeks are all about play and exploration. Your baby is coming to the table for their first meal, but even saying that, their meal makes parents feel sometimes like they're going to be sitting down and eating a full plate of food, when in reality, they're just coming down or coming to the table and sitting down to a few pieces of food or a little bit of food and exploring it. They don't even know yet that the food at the table is food and can fill their belly in the same way that a breast or a bottle feed can fill their belly. They're still exploring food right at first as though it is a toy. So babies are driven at 6 months old, 7 months old, 5 months old to explore their environment through their hands and through their mouth. So to reach out, grab something and bring it to their mouth to try and figure out what it is. They're going to do the same thing with food. That said, we want baby to then be calm, alert, happy, awake, in a really nice place to come to the table to do that. You don't want them learning this new skill when they're tired or when they're cranky or not feeling great. So in those first few weeks, we're looking at coming to the table just once per day is plenty. If your baby has many periods of the day where they're calm, awake, alert, and happy, you can, of course, come to the table 2 times a day or even 3 times a day if you really want, but just know that that is not necessary. And it's not necessary because your baby has a safety net right now. They have the safety net of breast milk or formula to fill their belly as they learn this new skill. So coming to the table is all about just learning what it looks like to be at the table. So once a day at first is plenty. A couple other things to keep in mind. There's no perfect time of day to come to the table when you first start solids. There are lots of times during the day that will work fine, and your baby will sort of guide you and your family's schedule will guide you on when works best for you. So I'm also seeing questions about whether or not you have to start with purees, whether or not you can jump straight into finger foods, what textures are good textures to start with, what foods are the best foods to start with. The short answer here is that the old method of serving purees, a thin, watery puree, and then gradually increasing in texture to something thicker, then something mashed and lumpy, and then eventually something soft and mashable, little pieces of food. meltable puffs and meltable yogurt drops, things like that, that method has been shown to not be necessary for the vast majority of babies. And the way babies learn to eat is actually completely different than that method is implying. So you don't need to start with purees and gradually increase from there.
So I think something
You
that like helps a lot of people, at least in my orbit, understand this is that babies and kids all learn to do things from really big things to really small things. So, for example, when we're learning to catch a ball, we learn to catch a beach ball. And again, I can barely catch a beach ball now, but you learn to catch a big beach ball before you learn to catch a basketball, before you learn to catch a baseball, before you learn to catch a golf ball. Because the bigger the item, the more your brain can acknowledge that it's there. In the case of catching, your eyes and your hands have a better chance of figuring out the coordination to get to them. And then you slowly develop the fine motor or the tiny coordination to get those smaller things. What we have found through the research is that babies learn to eat the same exact way. So this idea that they need to go through a progression of textures to build skill doesn't actually line up in how they learn. How they learn is by moving their tongue and their mouth around and exploring these bigger pieces of food. So their brain's like, oh, I can find out where that is. Oh, I know how to get my tongue to that. Oh, I can feel that. I can spit that out. This all makes sense. And then they slowly develop this skill to get down to smaller sizes. Now, the cool thing also here is that we know from the research that feeding themselves decreases choking risk. Please file that away in your brains. Really important for us all to remember that feeding themselves decreases choking risk. And a baby that's 6, 7, 8 months of age can only grab really large pieces of food. So you can see from this picture here, this is a soft steamed broccoli floret, for example, or like a slice or a piece of nice soft banana or avocado or a piece of fish there in the middle. But these foods are all cut in a way that a baby can grab it and hold it in their whole hand. And then they are nice and soft. So if a parent were to squish it between their fingertips, it would mash nicely. So when that gets into the baby's mouth, they can practice mushing and moving the food around.
So just know, again, that the research is very clear now that it is not about starting with one easy texture and then gradually increasing to more challenging textures. That actually does not help baby build the strongest oral motor skills. What builds the strongest oral motor skills and builds a wide interest in a variety of foods is serving a variety of textures, flavors, sizes from the start. Big sizes that baby can pick up, but purees are also just fine. You don't need to skip purees or skip that phase of mashed foods entirely. We have a lot of questions about iron and about nutrition. So I just want to take a moment to touch on the fact that when you are first getting started, I've said this multiple times now, but baby's belly is not getting full with the foods at the table because they don't even know yet that these are foods and that they can fill their belly. And the skills to eat a wide variety of foods are not going to be there for several more months. So when we think about nutrition, we want to think about breast milk or formula meeting baby's nutritional needs. Now, I say that knowing that the one thing that comes up a lot, probably many of you are asking this question because of this, is that iron is a key nutrient that baby has a wide store of in their body at birth. And from birth to about 6 months, those iron stores start to be used up and they're not easily replenished with just simply breastfeeding or bottle feeding. That said, formula in the US is iron fortified. So if your baby is a formula fed baby, they are getting the iron that they need from their formula. If your baby is a breastfeeding baby, while they may not be getting the quantity of iron that is what you will find in formula, that iron tends to be more bioavailable to baby's belly. And so those iron, that supplement of iron tends to be more easily absorbed by baby's body. That said, we know that iron is an important nutrient that we need to help incorporate into baby's diet as soon as they are able to do that. So the best way to do that is to serve iron-rich foods from the start. And we say early and often. You're just keeping those foods in baby's diet. So for example, if we are serving them finger foods, where we know they're not going to get a lot in their belly, we can still serve iron-rich finger foods that baby is chewing, mouthing, munching on like a piece of steak. We have videos of this that we'll show, where baby is getting some flecks of iron as they suck on the juices of the meat. So they are getting exposed to that nutrient, and they are getting that nutrient in their solid food meals without us having to really push them or worry about that. If you believe your baby is at particular risk of iron deficiency, you can talk with your baby's doctor about a supplement, because we know that 6-month-old babies shouldn't have the skills to eat a wide variety of solid foods yet. They just don't. So expecting them to do that in order to meet iron needs is not realistic.
On top of that, we can create the most perfect balanced plate with exactly the right amount of fat, exactly the right amount of carbohydrate, the right amount of protein, the excessive amounts of iron, you name it. It could be beautifully curated, Michelin rated baby plate of food. And if your baby is not interested in eating it, or they don't have the skills to eat it, it doesn't matter. And this is something that we keep coming back to in toddlerhood. In toddlerhood, when they don't have breast milk and formula supporting their nutrition as much, you need your toddler to not only know how to eat these foods, but want to. The research is very clear that exposure during that 6 to 12 month window is critical for acceptance in toddlerhood. And even if they go off of a food for a while, coming back to that food again. So try to put your brain in a moment of, they are learning about these foods. I want them to learn about these nourishing foods. And it's really important for me to offer them opportunities to learn. Now, I'm going to show you a video of my daughter Maeve's first food, because again, I told you guys that she was born during COVID. It was a very weird time period. And my prenatal appointments were mostly virtual. It's just a very weird time to be pregnant. Marisa, who's in the chat, also was pregnant with twins at the same time. And the first time I felt her move, I was eating pineapple, and I was eating like a pineapple breakfast thing. And that kind of made me emotional to think that that was my first time of feeling like normal pregnancy, whatever. It just felt like, wow, this is what it's supposed to feel like. Instead of going to the prenatal classes and all this, I'm, doing stuff over Zoom. And so it just felt like a special thing. And so when we decided to start solids with Maeve, or when she started showing readiness and she was closer to 6.5 months, we started with pineapple. So this is a video of me giving her a spear of pineapple her first time. Man, she had funky hair. And again, she has no idea that this is food at this point, but she knows that this is something that's interesting that she can grab onto, bring to her mouth, and start exploring like any other toy. Now, of course, you can see even at 6.5 months, and she was a 36-week late preterm baby, she still wasn't sitting perfectly. But then something that I did was I pulled out my own piece of pineapple and ate it in front of her to show her what I was expecting of her and what she was supposed to do.
So the main thing that we want to convey to families when it comes to starting solids, so where do I start those first few weeks, is that just about any food can be served safely to your baby from day one. There's not one best first food. There's not even 10 best first foods. There are dozens and dozens, probably hundreds of best first foods. And what's best for me and my baby on the West Coast of the US, when I start solids, say, for example, in February, is going to look different than the best first foods for somebody who, I saw somebody in the chat from Costa Rica who's getting started with their first food in, say, August. There's a difference in what's available to me. There's a difference in what I eat and love, and what we know very, very deeply. What we know is that the foods that are served early and often in infancy tend to be the foods that babies grow up to love in toddlerhood, and then throughout childhood and well beyond. So the flavors that you love and that are important to your family, those are the flavors that you want to focus on. The textures, the special foods, the cultural foods that you love and serve are the ones that you want to introduce to your baby early, and keep in the rotation often. Somebody in the chat mentioned, but shouldn't we be serving single ingredient foods? Yes, right at first, a single ingredient food is an excellent idea for getting started. I will point out that the research doesn't say that it has to be that. And actually, it's perfectly okay. Like, for example, one of Kim's daughters started off with steak that was cooked with some olive oil and a little bit of garlic. So it's not even one food at that point.
Alongside strips of bell pepper and onion too. It was Taco Tuesday.
Exactly. We're going to talk about allergens in just a minute, but know that there are only a very small number of foods that are considered common allergens, and that those foods, because they have a higher risk of causing a food allergy, should be introduced one at a time, just so you can rule out any negative responses to those foods. But all the rest of the foods that are not common allergens can potentially be mixed even from day one if you want. That said, we love single ingredient foods for babies right at first because A, they're easy as a parent to reach for and serve. B, they're simple enough for baby to explore well. And C or three, I can't remember if I was numbering or lettering this list. Your baby is getting the chance to explore some really simple flavors at first rather than jumping to more complex flavors, which is great because we want them to learn that some of those simpler flavors are really delicious. They've only really known breast milk or formula up till that point. And yes, breast milk can actually have a pretty wide variety of flavors in it. We know that if you eat a lot of garlic, for example, your breast milk will both smell and taste like garlic. There's some cool studies out there looking at ways that you can manipulate the flavor of your breast milk, and that actually babies who are exposed to those flavors through your breast milk or through your amniotic fluid, even when pregnant, tend to gravitate to those foods more when they start solids. So what we know, again, is that your baby has their most openness, the most open window they will ever have to new flavors, new textures, and new foods from about 6 to 9 months. And I say that knowing that there are people whose babies are past 9 months in this webinar, and that might send you through the roof because you're like, I've missed my window. You haven't missed your window. Babies are still highly capable of learning. But what we know from the research is that there's a window from 6 to 9 months where it is the easiest it will ever be to introduce your baby to new foods. And single ingredient foods are a great place to start. You can start with them pureed and mashed. You can start with them as finger foods, and the variety of textures that you serve, not just one and then slowly progressing, but serving puree one day and a finger food the next, or serving puree and finger food together, help baby build a stronger ability to handle variety and a wider ability to problem solve with the different textures that are coming at them in food. Because we know food is weird. Food has a wide variety of texture to it, even from bite to bite. So I can have the exact same food. I might have a piece of cantaloupe, for example, and the first bite that might be closer to the rind is very firm and a little bit crunchy, whereas a bite in the middle might be very soft and really sweet. So food has a variety to it throughout, even if you're dealing with the exact same food, let alone if you're thinking about different foods. And baby's brain is not just learning how to eat cantaloupe, it's learning how to deal with that variety and how to problem solve and handle all the different ways that even just cantaloupe might show up in their mouth.
So as we look at a few videos of babies actually doing this, I'm going to toss in a few of the questions that have come in through social media so we can share that with the group as well. So here's a video of Cooper eating a strip of steak. So again, there's no research or any reason to not serve meat to your baby, especially because it is iron rich. It's one of those foods that we really love offering to a baby early on. It builds oral motor skills. They get that nice amount of iron, and it's perfect for self-feeding. But on Instagram, we have questions about how much food we give. And again, like Kary said, in the beginning, your baby doesn't even know that that is actually food. So around 6 months of old, 6 months of age, we tend to recommend one meal, which is really just coming to the table one time a day and giving 1 or 2 pieces of food. Your baby probably is not going to want to be at the table for more than a few minutes. But if you have a baby that loves sitting there and, shooting the shit with you at the table and having a good time and enjoying themselves. What? It's true, right? They want to come and hang out with you, and they love sitting there with food. Go for it. Let them sit there and explore food longer. You can always give them a little bit more. Around 9 months, we're aiming for about 2 meal exposures a day. And again, we don't have to think about exactly a specific amount of food. We're just following their lead. You give them a piece or two, and maybe they start grunting or pointing or showing you in their communication that they want a little bit more, and then you can offer more. When they show you that they're all done, they're throwing food, they're looking away, they're falling asleep, they're fussing, they're telling you that they're all done, you move on with your meal, you offer breast or bottle feed to supplement that. As you get closer to a year, that's when you actually want to be trying to get in 3 table meals a day, and even considering adding in snacks into toddlerhood. So that's kind of the how much. We're also getting a ton of questions about water. And especially since we're in the summer, it's a great time to talk about this. But water is not necessary under a year, but the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that you can start offering water around 6 months, or when you start solids. It's also a great way to help with the constipation that sometimes happens when you start solid food, as their baby's gut gets used to having something new in it. Our staff pediatrician gastroenterologist recommends no more than 4 ounces total a day. The AAP says up to 8. But the idea of water is really just to help them figure out how to drink from a cup and a straw, and also, again, to like keep things moving in their gut, because their gut's getting used to a whole plethora of new things. So you can offer a little bit of water in an open cup or from a straw cup. Generally, I'd say most people do about 1 ounce at a meal. Don't worry about how much your baby is drinking. Many times once they actually start weaning off breast and bottle, they start to take a little bit more water. One other question on here, Kary, is about teeth.
Yeah, so that's a really common one. A lot of people believe that if their baby has teeth, you can't hand them a bell pepper like you're seeing here with Eunonia. You absolutely can. Teeth are actually not necessary for starting solids in general, and they're not necessary for starting solids with this approach. Your baby has
preventative. Like, they're not necessary and also not a problem. Like,
exactly. So we do get the opposite question sometimes too, which is, but can I serve these foods because my baby has teeth and I'm worried they're going to bite off pieces? So on both sides of that equation, you can get started with solids and you can serve them finger foods like you see here. Your baby has strong jaws to bite through food and a really strong ability to chew food with reflexes that they have in place right from the start, with or without teeth. And if teeth are present, they are more likely than other babies to be able to actively bite off pieces of the food. But we know that that is part of the learning process. It's not a problem and it's not a mistake. We want them to bite off pieces of food and we expect them to bite off pieces of food, because that is how they learn how to move the food around in the mouth, process the food, and figure out how to swallow it. So those teeth are actually an important part of learning that, but they're not necessary. A lot of babies don't get their first teeth until closer to 12 months or 9, 10 months, and they should be eating a wide variety of foods by then, or at least exploring a wide variety of foods by then. And the teeth that will most help them chew, their molars, don't come in until usually after 12 months, sometimes closer to 24 months in babies. So by then, your toddler should be eating a wide variety of foods, and those molars are just icing on the cake to help them grind and break them down. They're not a necessary step in them learning how to eat.
So if you're in the bucket of people that is just feeling really nervous about this, it's also completely fine to start with purees and mashes that we would hope are foods that you and your family want to eat as well, because babies learn by watching us. And so here, for example, we see Finley, right?
Yeah.
Exploring an
Riley.
Riley, you're right. Exploring oatmeal that has peanut butter mixed in. And in this case, the family is also having oatmeal for breakfast. So everybody's eating the same thing. Baby can watch and learn and pick up those skills. But the beauty here is that she is using her own hands to bring that food, and in that case, a loaded spoon, to her mouth. Now over here, you see baby Owen, who's exploring mashed sweet potato on his tray. And we love this video because Owen has developmental difficulties. Sorry, Owen has developmental differences, and he is actually receiving feeding therapy at the time that he had this video taken. But his mom just needed to give him a little bit of support and show him that the food was in front of him so he could reach out and grab it. He just needed a little bit of help to know that he could do it. There's this saying of in OT language about the just right challenge. So we don't want to do it for the baby. We want to show them, hey, you've got some really good skills. Let me give you just enough help so you can actually explore it as well.
So we like showing videos of this in action because a video is worth 1,000 words. We could tell you all day that this is natural and normal, and it is a very seamless progression in terms of the developmental skills that your baby has and the developmental skills that we're trying to get them to learn. But the best thing we can do is show you other babies eating in this way so you can see that it's possible. Because if you have not heard of this before, or you think babies are only supposed to eat purees when they get started, it can sound a little preposterous to say you can just hand them a piece of food and trust that they'll be safe. We're going to talk about gagging in a minute. We're going to talk about choking in a minute, because we know that's what's on everybody's minds when we say you can just hand a baby a piece of food and get started. But before we do, we want to just talk a little bit about, again, habits of how you get started. So right at first, again, we're just looking at building the habit of coming to the table happy and exploring. So coming to the table once per day is, generally speaking, plenty when baby is calm and alert. Coming to the table in the morning is ideal if you're introducing a common allergen, but it's not necessary. You can come to the table for lunchtime. You can come to the table for dinner time if you need, especially if you're a working parent and you just don't have the capacity in the morning. It is perfectly fine to do solid foods in the evening, or to do solid foods only on the weekends for the first couple weeks if you're just not able to handle it during the weekdays. Know that there is a lot of flexibility here, and there's not one right way to do it. We know the more baby practices, the more skills that they build. I also have seen so many questions in the chat, and I just want to point out that we are hitting on as much as we can hit on, but this topic is a very complex, rich, exciting topic with lots of nuance. So you'll hear us say over and over again, this is what you can do, or this is what we recommend, but there's also this other way you can do things, which I know sometimes as a parent, you're like, don't tell me that there's 8 ways to do this. Just tell me there's one and let me do that approach. But what we know is that babies are very different. Every baby will be a little bit different. And so we want you to know that there are different ways that you can do this that work for your family, that work for your baby. That is why we created an app. We cannot possibly answer all these questions in the course of one webinar. And we're going to talk a little bit about a coaching product that we're offering at the end. But we created that because of all these questions that people have. All these specific individual questions about, well, how do I introduce this food? Or my baby does this, what does this mean? Or how do I help them if they don't like X or Y or Z? There's always these specific questions. So first and foremost, our app will show you how to prepare just about any food you can think of, any food that you've dropped in the chat. How do I introduce soy? How do I introduce corn on the cob? How do I introduce chicken? Any of those questions, you can find your answers in the app. We show you for free how to cut and prepare and serve foods to be safe for your baby at a wide variety of ages. And if you're feeling like, I still have so many questions, I feel so stressed about this and I want to get it right, we will talk about our coaching series that we've created for just that reason, because we've had so many parents ask us, I just want you to be at my side while I introduce solids. I just want you to check in with me once a week and make sure I'm doing this right, or answer my specific questions. So we've got your back with that too. But again, we're trying to cover a lot here. We're going to do the best we can to keep going. So let's talk about gagging and choking, because we know this is at the front of everyone's minds.
Yeah, and the important thing about gagging and choking is this is what circles back to the idea or the theoretical framework that says you start with a bigger piece of food and then you go down to a smaller piece of food. So this is going to potentially blow your mind, because we think about babies and food, you think about small pieces of food, but the small piece of food for a baby is actually significantly higher choking risk than a large piece of food. And that is because of how babies learn to eat. Like we were saying, babies learn to eat by having big things first, or learn how to do anything by having lots of sensory information. So big size, lots of pressure, providing lots of touch to the inside of their mouth, so their tongue and their jaw is like, oh, I recognize that that's there, as opposed to something that's teeny tiny. Their tongue barely can find that object and has no idea how to move it around. So we go in a large piece of food so the baby's brain gets a better idea of what it is and how to move it. Secondly, we know based on the studies that self-feeding decreases choking risk. And a baby that is 6 to 8 months only has the ability to pick things up with a gross grasp. They don't have the ability to use a pincer grasp to pick up a small piece of food and bring it to their mouth. And if you as the parent pick up that small piece of food and put it in their mouth, what do we know? Choking risk increases significantly. So the only food that a baby can feed themselves is a large piece of food. And we know that that big piece of food is actually protecting them against choking. So this may, again, sound weird, but the airway is about the size of a pen or a drinking straw. It's not very big. A big piece of steak is not going to be getting stuck in there. But what is going to be getting stuck in there? A peanut, a pistachio, a Barbie shoe, something that's small enough to fit into that little tube, and not only fit into the tube, but get lodged, is something that's considered a choking hazard and would be risky. So again, the bigger we go, the more baby's brain realizes the food is there, the more opportunity the tongue and the jaw have to move that food around and do something with it, and therefore the less choking risk. The smaller the item, if baby's not self-feeding it, the higher the risk of choking. On top of it, between 6 to 9 months, babies have very, very strong protective reflexes against choking. I'm going to turn the volume down just because it's loud, but
this is a very intense video of baby Reza gagging while I am working with him. He gags not just once, but then he gags again, and he works on the food a little bit and then ends up gagging again. He is struggling to get that piece of food out of his mouth, but he is never unsafe. He is not doing anything abnormal here. And I am here just to tell him that I see him. He's doing a great job, and to help keep him calm so that, boom, he spit the piece of food back out. And you can go back to the beginning, Kim, and show that one again. But he is having some really big gags. But what I like to point out to families, and what I pointed out to this family as I was working with Reza, is he is not unsafe. Those gagging responses are automatic reflexes, and they are designed to protect the airway. A gag is a good thing for babies who are exploring solid foods because it keeps the food at the front of the mouth. And one of the coolest things about the gag reflex at 6 to 9 months is that it sits at about the mid-blade, the midpoint of baby's tongue, which means that it gets triggered pretty easily and when the food is very far forward in the mouth. With you or I, or with a toddler even, or a 12-month-old baby, the gag reflex has moved towards the back of the mouth, which means that food has to get pretty far back before a gag is triggered. So that food is quite close to the airway at that point if it's in the back of the throat. Whereas a gag that gets triggered when food hits the middle of the tongue, that food is nowhere near the airway, and baby is able to further move it forward and get it back out, or keep it at the front of their mouth. And keeping it at the front of their mouth is the most important thing, because that's where the food can help trigger baby's chewing reflexes. So as baby learns to eat, it is an entire balance of fostering and triggering baby's chewing reflexes while relying on their safety reflexes. So that gag reflex and what we call a tongue thrust reflex or a tongue thrust pattern. Those two things and the swallow reflex help to keep baby safe as they explore food, while the food itself triggers the baby's natural chewing reflexes. So you don't have to teach baby to chew. Your baby automatically, their brain automatically knows the movements of learning to chew before they even get started, just like your baby automatically knew the motions of breastfeeding or bottle feeding without you having to teach them. They came out of the womb knowing those things. It's the same with learning to eat solid foods. So we're capitalizing on those reflexes when they're at their strongest, in order to help them go from using reflexes to learning skills. So just like at first, those reflexes help them breast and bottle feed, those reflexes actually go away after a few months, and your baby doesn't need reflexes to breast or bottle feed because they now have skills of breast and bottle feeding to replace them. Same goes for learning to eat solids, right? At first, they rely on reflexes of chewing. And over time, they build the skills of moving food around in their mouth. So it's no longer reflexive, it's a skill that they've learned.
So one thing we hear a lot about gagging is that, oh, I'm going to start with purees so I just don't have to deal with the gagging. And while I wish that that actually was the case, what the research and our clinical practice shows is that it just kicks the can down the line a little bit. So typically, whenever a baby learns to eat, and again, many babies actually gag with purees as well. Anytime the baby starts exploring chewable foods, and this could be small pieces, big pieces, etc., we're going to see some gagging, because the gagging is the brain's way of being like, wait, there's something in my mouth and I'm not really sure about it. I don't want to swallow it because I'm not so sure about it. And I don't want it to go into my breathing tube. So I'm going to close off my breathing tube and I'm going to push that thing forward and out. It's very common. It happens again at 6 months. It can happen at 9, 10, 11 months if that's when you start to do finger foods. What we know from the literature, though, is that when babies are older and they are gagging, they're more what's the word I'm thinking of, Kary? They're more, they
Perturbed by it.
they're more bothered by it. The 6, like with baby Reza, you could see he gagged that piece of food out and then kind of was a little irritated, but then just went back on. Kary gave him a different piece of food and we moved on. The older they get, the more they realize that it's uncomfortable. It's something that they don't like. And so we do see a little bit more of a connection of struggling to get past that when they do it later on. We did see a question about throwing up from gagging. This can happen, especially in babies that have a history of reflux or any kind of sensitive belly. My first daughter, Maeve, was a puker. Something that we recommend that you do is you space out your table food meals and your breast feeds or bottle feeds by a little bit longer. So while we don't want baby to come to the table starving because they really have no idea how to get their food into their belly and make them feel full, when they're a gag to puke kind of kid, you actually want to give them a little bit more time for their belly to settle after their breast and bottle feed before coming to the table. The other thing you may want to do is avoid foods that are really sticky. So while very common first foods, things like sweet potato, banana, and avocado are really, really mushy and many times stick to the roof of the mouth a little bit. And that can cause that really intense gagging that can lead to repetitive gagging over and over again that causes throwing up. So that does make me think too, when we're looking at gagging versus choking, and you could see that really beautifully with the video of Reza, when a baby is gagging, you'll see a cupped tongue, and you tend to see the baby trying to move something forward. So you can see his tongue is cupped. You can see his mouth is cupped. Choking is a sucking in of air. It's when the airway is actually plugged and the baby can't get the thing out, or the baby adult, whoever it may be. So with gagging, you'll see a cupped tongue. Many times you'll see forward movement. You might hear coughing. All signs of gagging, not something you need to be worried about. Choking, on the other hand, you will see baby struggling to breathe. You may hear a wheeze, a little like squeaking sound, or no sounds at all. You'll see a tugging in because they're trying to get air into the airway. And at worst case scenario, you'll actually see some color changes or some ashiness looking in their skin. But again, I want to reiterate this too. Coughing does not equal choking. Coughing tells us that there's air moving and there is nothing wrong. Coughing is good. Coughing is okay. Tell yourself that. Write it on your refrigerator. Don't be worried if somebody's coughing. That means that there's air flowing and they're getting something out. In the same way that if you swallow something funky, you are going to be coughing and trying to get that away from your airway.
And a couple plugs again for the app. We have a wonderful video, like a full video on gagging and choking in the app that a lot of parents tell us, especially nervous parents, are like, that was gold. That was the best part of the app. I just needed to rewatch that a few times. We also have a full article on gagging and choking in the app. We have a rescue guide that's for infants and a rescue guide for toddlers that's available for free to anyone to download in the app. And lastly, we just launched a new mini quiz and little series on gagging versus choking to help families better understand the difference and to feel more confident. Because two things. One, choking is very rare. But two, knowing how to respond is incredibly important, because in the very rare instance where it should happen, it's actually very responsive to well-performed choking rescue. So again, very rare. We don't want parents to worry about it. And it's one of those things that we naturally think of as a big risk. It's not. And you should know that your baby from 6 to 12 months if they do have a choking incident, is way more likely to choke on non-food items than on food items, especially when they're seated at the table. So choking risk is low, and it is very responsive to your well-performed and quick choking rescue. So we are very big as an organization on training parents, on putting content out there to help parents understand how to respond, because again, babies are more likely to choke on non-food items. You're more likely to be sort of out in the community and have to help somebody whose baby got something in their mouth at a play date or something like that. And you want to know how to respond, because it's very, very likely that it will be effective, and you'll move on with your day after that happens. So gagging and choking are probably the biggest questions that we get. And the next one is about introducing allergens. So we're not going to be able to cover everything you need to know about this, but we're going to hit on some of the high level points so that you feel more confident with introducing allergens.
So the first thing that's important to know is that the recommendation is actually now to introduce allergens early. Years ago, it was actually recommended to wait until baby was older, and in some circumstances much older, to introduce allergens. And the data showed that allergies actually increased. So the new recommendation from the American Academy of Allergy and Immunology and Asthma is to start AAAAI is to start introducing those common allergens around the same time that you start solid foods. Now, the one exception here is if your baby is high risk for developing a food allergy. The two things that make your baby high risk for developing a food allergy are, one, a pre-existing food allergy. So most of us don't know at the time of starting solids. And then the second is moderate to severe eczema. So most babies have a little bit of eczema, like in the crooks of their arms or their knees, but we're talking about significant eczema that covers a large amount of their body that their physician has been working with you to treat. That puts them at a higher risk of developing a food allergy. If that's the case, the AAAAI actually recommends starting allergens as early as 4 months old, but we're not saying starting solids at 4 months. We're just saying introducing allergens at that time. So if your baby is high risk, talk to your child's provider about starting allergens early. If they're not, around 6 months is completely reasonable. Now, there are 9 common food allergens in the United States, but these do change depending on what country you're in. In the US, the 9 common allergens are egg, peanut, dairy, tree nut, finned fish, shellfish, sesame, soy, and wheat.
Nailed it.
Did it. And the 3 that have the strongest research for introducing early are eggs, peanut, and dairy. So if you're going to introduce any of the allergens immediately around 6 months, you want to start with egg, peanut, and dairy. Now, we recommend to most families, and our allergist recommends, to not do an allergen as your first food, mostly because in the rare event that there is an allergic reaction, that's kind of a scary, non-positive experience for your first time coming to the table. So generally speaking, we say, get your sea legs, figure out sitting at the table and kind of figure out your routine. And then within the first couple weeks, start that first allergen. You do want to introduce allergens one at a time. So you're not going to do dairy and peanut together for their first exposure, but you can introduce an allergen alongside a non-allergenic food. For example, you can do a small taste of peanut butter and then maybe give baby a strip of banana for them to explore while you're waiting to see if there's an allergic reaction. And Kary's going to talk about reactions in a moment. But when it comes to common allergens, you want to introduce them across 3 exposures. So you'll do a small taste, and you can, if you want to, but you do not have to, you can start with 1/8 of a teaspoon. Again, you do not have to measure this out, and you do not need to stress about your baby ingesting the entire amount. During the next exposure, you would give them slightly more, so maybe 1/4 of a teaspoon. And during the third exposure, maybe you go up to 1/2 a teaspoon or a teaspoon. But the idea is that you expose it over either 3 days or 3 exposures in 1 day, depending on how brave you feel. And you want to slowly increase the amount of the allergen that you give. Now, the crazy thing about this is that the research tells us that the way to prevent food allergy, the highest likelihood of preventing a food allergy, is not only if we introduce the allergens early, but that we keep them in our child's diet up until age 6. Now, regularly. So regularly means more than once a week. I think the research says 2 to 3 times a week, but our allergen is like, our allergist basically says, if you guys can make it work once a week, that's awesome. Full disclosure, I definitely have not kept all 9 allergens in my kids' diet every single week. It feels impossible. But we say do your best, and specifically egg, peanut, and dairy are probably one of the ones that are the easiest to do. But just keeping them in the diet regularly is the key to actually preventing the food allergy along the line.
So we are at time, but we're going to keep going just to finish this up. We don't want to rush away from here. So if you need to drop off, you absolutely can do that. We are going to try to post the recording after this, but we're on a new platform, so there's a chance that it might not post. We try to do some of these free webinars regularly, though, so you can always jump on another one if you need, and we'll post when we have the next one available. So let's talk about allergic reactions and signs of that, and then I want to talk about a question that comes up or that I've seen in the comments around what if they bite off a small piece from a big piece of food, which is, I think, a really astute question to ask. So again, when it comes to allergic reactions, we're going to be looking for 3 buckets. I'm not going to go into tons of detail, but we're looking for allergic reactions that happen on baby's skin, in baby's GI system or gut, and then more systemically, especially respiratory. So those 3 buckets are where you tend to see allergic reactions. We have a beautiful article on allergic reactions on our website and available in our app, where you can look to see what this looks like, especially the skin reactions on babies with different skin tones, because it can be very easy on a really pale baby to see red splotchy hives or a rash that has shown up, but a lot less easy to spot that on darker skin tone babies. So those are the 3 buckets you're going to look for reactions in. Know that when it comes to allergic reactions, they're either mild or severe. There's no middle ground. There's no, oh, maybe that's getting moderate. Nope. It's either a mild, and the minute you get a slightly bigger reaction, so 1 or 2 small hives, mild. 1 or 2 small hives and babies vomiting, severe. You need to call emergency services. Let them know that you've introduced a common allergen, and let them know that you'll need an EpiPen. Better safe than sorry, because like choking, which is rare but very responsive to emergency services, allergic responses, also very rare and also very responsive to emergency services.
So again, Kary mentioned these, but keep them in your mind. We're looking at the 3 different systems. So if you're having one system, it's most likely a mild reaction. If you have more than one system together, severe reaction. And we get the question all the time about, do I need to have an EpiPen? Do I need to introduce allergens in the parking lot of the hospital? And our allergist is very, very steadfast in saying, no, you don't. The vast majority of babies will not develop an allergy to food. But please, if you're feeling nervous, talk to your pediatrician. They're there to support you. They can help walk you through this. But again, the vast majority of babies are not going to develop an allergic reaction to a food.
All right, so we're going to wrap up here. Again, we've covered a lot. There is so much more to cover, but just know that feeding your baby is such an intimate, wonderful moment of building connection. And that is what we want you to most focus on. That's why we created tools, so that you don't have to know all this stuff. You can rewatch this webinar 10 times and try to learn all the things, but Kim and I have been doing this for 20 plus years. You don't need to know all this information. So the information that you do need to know, we've put in an app to try and make it easy for you, because the goal is for you to enjoy the connection with your baby, not to feel stressed.
So for those of you that do want a little bit more help, and again, like Kary had mentioned earlier, we put this together because it was asked for. We have developed a live coaching program. So it's a month-long program. We meet once a week, where we actually go through each and every single one of these topics with a fine-tooth comb. And we go through every single nitty-gritty, what if, how do I do this? What if this happens? What about cups and straws and taking big bites and overstuffing, and their tongue doesn't seem to be moving right? If you have questions about those things, that's what our live coaching is for. And Kary and I like to think about it as if we were all sitting in the room together, and we were coaching you, just like she was in that video with baby Reza. The other thing that's really cool about this is that you're in a group with other parents that are also going through it with you. So their babies are the same age, they're doing the same thing as you. And so you kind of have your own little community there that you can reach out to and talk to and hang out with.
And we like people to know this is not for everybody. If you're like, you know what, I learned what I need to learn, I've got this, I'm going to use the app, or I'm going to look things up when I need, you don't need a coaching program like this. But for parents who are feeling anxious, this has been gold. This is like when I get to sit in the room, Kim and I sit in the room with some friends and say, no, 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 no. You're overthinking it. Try this instead. Or, oh, actually, I'm seeing, based on what you're saying, that maybe you should try something slightly different for your baby because they don't seem as interested in this as other babies are. It's an opportunity to have your questions asked or your questions answered by us. It's also an opportunity to dive deeper into some of these things than we dive into with something like this. And it's an opportunity for you to connect with other parents who are going through the exact same stage at the exact same time. So they're a lot of fun to do. And if you are feeling anxious or feeling like you need more guidance, this is for you. If you're feeling confident, by all means, you do not need a coaching program. So we have the private community access, which you can start as soon as you sign up. You get access to this community so you can ask us questions and talk to the other parents. We have office hours outside of the actual training calls so that you can jump on to be like, oh my gosh, this thing happened. Or I tried an allergen today and somebody asked this question. Well, how do I know if they puked because they had an allergic reaction or they puked because they were just too full? Those are perfect questions to jump on and ask. And we can ask you the right questions to help get to the bottom of some of these things rather than, again, getting a more generic answer. And then you get the picky eating and toddler playbook that we think is absolute gold because your baby is going to want to explore foods. Most babies do. It's a wonderful phase of openness. Toddlers are very different. So even if you start with a solid foundation, doing all the right things, which should help them progress well, some toddlers weasel their way back into pickiness because toddlers are toddlers. They have a completely different brain set that they're working with than babies do. So there's lots of things that happen in toddlerhood that can undermine that really strong foundation that you laid. It doesn't mean that that was not useful to lay that foundation. It just means you need some different tool sets.
So again, if this seems like it would be something that would be helpful to you, we would love to see you. It starts next week on Wednesday. And if you don't think you need this much help, like Kary said, our app is wonderful. You can go in there and search Big Bite, and an entire article that Kary and I wrote and researched is up there. You can type in there iron, and an article that our dietitian has written is in there to support you. Constipation, our GI doctor has published all kinds of really great information that's there for you. So it's all there in the app if you just want to be able to have it at your fingertips and pull it out of the table when you need it.
Somebody also asked about receiving the First Foods checklist. That's going to be emailed to you after this webinar ends. So again, thank you for joining us. We love talking about this stuff. We hope we answered your question, or that Marisa, who is in the chats, being an absolute rock star, got to your question. If not, we will again host more of these live webinars, or go ahead and sign up for our coaching program if you have more specific questions.
And if you're on your cell phone, I just learned this, you can screenshot a QR code and then it lets you tap it from the screenshot. So like that was a cool new thing that I learned. And for
life hack.
Life hack, right? And then for those of you that are thinking about signing up for the coaching session, we do have two plans, so to say. One is just kind of going to the webinars and having the 4 sessions, but then we also have the more complete plan that Kary was talking about that have these extra office hours and the community for you to chat with, and the extra toddler and picky stuff. And today, so if you decide to sign up today, you get that complete program. So the program with all the extra bells and whistles for the price of the regular Foundations program. So great deal if you want to do that today. But know that the app is a great option, the coaching is a great option, and hopefully this at least gave you just a little bit of additional information to decrease your stress level and come to the table happy. So thanks, everybody. We really enjoyed chatting with you all today, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.